Hi, an observation. It seems that more and more award entries and entries that win creatively seem to be from either charities or public service broadcasters, and increasingly not from a lot of the big companies that actually we rely on to pay the bills. Good thing, bad thing, sign of the times?
Yeah, I think it's not so true as you suggest, but because we could look back 30 years and see what proportion of the top winners each year were from public service. One advantage, obviously, is that the subject matter is already quite dramatic if you're talking about drink driving or domestic violence or even the environment. And yeah, I think it's a good point, but I think it's a good thing, and I think you should comment, perhaps, on your theme last year.
So
cases for creativity.
Yeah, so Donald and I each year we count up the campaigns that have won both a Gold Lion and a Gold Effie in the previous year, and this year, or in 2013 rather, there were 12 of them. What was interesting, two of them were kind of public service, or one was public service and one was sort of a real CSR campaign. The others were all commercial campaigns, and 8 in total of the campaigns were companies that were building brands off a platform of social conscience and actually doing some good for the world around them. Like, for example, the Chipotle Cultivate a Better World work, or the Real Beauty sketches, or that nature of campaigns. I think what you're actually seeing is that you're right in that so much awarded work has come from that public sector, but actually the commercial community's learned how to leverage the power of doing good and using creativity to do that to make a bigger difference to themselves commercially. It's a real trend, and it's it's one that I think is a really good one.
Well, I was going to add a comment, which is that, if it is true, I think it's because of the challenge of doing more with less. Charities, public service organisations, particularly governmental ones, are all really strapped for money. And I think, to my way of thinking, one of the great advantages that markets like New Zealand have is, as James has said, they don't have money to throw at problems, they actually have to think instead. And I think if you're in any situation where the client is trying to do more with less and doesn't have a kind of rule book about how we do business, then it's going to throw up more creativity. It genuinely is. I'm just thinking to my own experience recently with the Australian Creative Awards that I'm working with. And aside from the fact that Dumb Ways to Die just kind of cleaned up with just about every award going, the rest were commercial at Creative Awards. Most of them were, and actually there weren't so many non-commercial ones there. So I'm not sure if it's the real truth. I'm sure there is a grain of truth in it, but there's still an awful lot of commercial creativity that is very innovative. And I know from experience that agencies that James has worked with in the past have been extremely good at producing it. So I think it's just about bravery, really, and being determined to be different.
Thank you. Question here.
Thanks. I was really interested in the fact that you brought up about if it rhymes, then it's more likely to be remembered and believed, and the Aussie quote about how if you can bloody sing it, you'll bloody remember it. It's really good. I just thought that was something really interesting, and I wondered if you could tell me what paper it was. And I was noticing as well, Dumb Ways to Die was a lovely song, and that clearly was well remembered and well received.
Yeah, totally. Actually, if you ask me, I'll dig up the paper. I think it might be in Kahneman's book, Thinking Fast and Slow, or it might be somewhere else. But I'll give you my card later, and I'll send you this. It's really lovely paper.
You should speak to Les Binet, sitting here, who did an analysis of the data bank and looked at the impact of music in its general sense on effectiveness, and he will tell you that there is a commercially valuable uplift. So music does have a power. Whether or not it rhymes is beyond the analysis, but music does.
It did. I think from one agency in particular, though, that was just their style, and they were really good at it. And often, in fact, Joe sang the jingles himself.
The first great age of UK advertising in the 50s and 60s was heavy on jingles, music and jingles and slogans, which became unfashionable probably by the 70s.
But I think the new wave of jingles aren't jingles in the 1950s sense, which just irritated them their way into your brain. I mean, like Dumb Ways to Die, it's just mesmeric. You find yourself whistling and singing it. I mean, I've listened to that case study about 4 or 5 times now, and I have to stop because I just get it on the brain. So I think they're more crafted. I mean, they're not really jingles. They're theme tunes, aren't they? They're something more than that. At least the good ones are.
Just want to say thanks for the examples given. I actually spent a long time in Australia and saw some of these campaigns. There's also like the Wrigley's X-Men or Mutant Gun. Not sure if you knew that one that came out. It was really good. And touched on the kind of all the multimedia channels that you've mentioned. I think there's culturally something in there about Australia and New Zealand being a bit more, having a greater appetite for risk, and that's why some of this work comes out. Which other markets are doing this now? Which other markets that we wouldn't really have thought of are coming out and being a bit more braver about what they're doing? And what do you think in the UK is stopping some of that work happening?
Who's being brave? Brazil?
Well, Argentina, Brazil. I don't think one should be tempted to answer that too much, because I think there are just pockets of brilliance that that can be anywhere. I mean, and also there's a tide of up and downers, because in the early days after the Berlin Wall came down, Poland and Czech Republic were doing suddenly amazing work, and then I guess maybe because the budgets got bigger and more people were involved and more processes were therefore introduced, it's all gone away. So to a certain extent, it's a moving feast, really. But I think every country can provide exceptions that would therefore disprove the rule that it tends to be a national thing.
Les.
Picking up actually on something you just said about more processes, and I noticed that several of the people that you interviewed were saying about informality, freedom to fail, not too many processes. Is there by any chance less pre-testing down under?
Yes, heaps. Yeah, I mean, in Australia there's a bit more. In New Zealand there's virtually none. Very little testing, and I think we probably, it's one of the blessings of not having much budget. There's just not gargantuan sums to spend on pre-testing. So okay. I think we use research in a really healthy way.
Would Mr. Field care to comment on the link between pre-testing and effectiveness?
We've talked about this so many times. As we all know here, there's for many years been a negative correlation between pre-testing and effectiveness. And I think, to be fair to the market research industry, it's an evolving challenge. I mean, so many of their research models are based on, say how you examine the effectiveness of a TV spot. And just as they're getting close to beginning to understand how a TV spot works, suddenly it's part of a multi-channel integrated campaign. The TV spot is just one little bit of it. So it's a moving target that I just think they can't keep up with. And for that reason, I think probably one shouldn't place too much faith in it, and you should always use judgment and intuition. And anyway, those of you who've read Daniel Kahneman's excellent book, Thinking Fast and Slow, will know that we should all learn to trust our intuitions more than we do. So get your clients to read Thinking Fast and Slow, and particularly the bit about intuition and how useful it is in making decisions.
And on that note, I'd like to close the evening, and I want to refer back to IPA President Ian Priest, because I think that adapt agenda that he is pursuing is with the intention of opening up the conversation with the client community about this desire for greater working relationships that enhance creative output. And some of the things you were talking about that we ended on in terms of the culture between clients and agencies that actually inspires creativity is one of the main tenets of what he's trying to pursue. And that whole thing about better relationship management and how we build back the trust into the relationship, I think we can campaign for this creative, inspirational output that comes from a better understanding of the culture that clients and agencies need to engender. So I think that's where we will take the conversation today, actually, put that back into the main agenda and see what we can do to sort of open up that environment to enhance creativity going forward, because the case is made. Thank you. Thanks very much for your time.